A wise man told me we are never given a dream without being given the power to make it true. You'll have to work for it, though. I'm Ron Schneider. Back in the 60s, I grew up around California theme parks, dreaming that someday I could make my living with that same kind of magic. In 1971, I got my first performing job at Magic Mountain. The 40 years that followed were one wild ride. And these are the stories of others who had that same dream and made it come true. Welcome to Wild Rides. I'm Ron Schneider. My guest today was born in Minnesota and has described himself as a broken-down horn player who builds urban entertainment centers. But for people who are in the performing business in Orlando, he's the man who revolutionized the city and the state and our industry. He's Rosie O'Grady's best man, Bob Snow. Bob, thank you so much for coming out.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
You're a man of many varied interests.
Yeah.
Former trumpet with the Minneapolis Symphony.
Yeah.
Ace Phantom jet pilot out of Pensacola with the Navy.
Yeah.
When and how did you get hooked on Dixieland jazz?
Well, you know, I worked my way through school, and I worked up in Alaska on fishing boats in the summertime, and then I came down and worked with the Dixieland band on the weekends, and I could make more money than most people could working all week. So I worked my way through school, and I quickly found out that as much as I loved concert music, that Dixieland was more fun, and I had a lot of fun.
I dare say. You took your last military paycheck and you opened Rosie O'Grady's warehouse and ultimately the Seville Quarter in downtown Pensacola.
Yeah.
How'd you find the nightclub business? How'd you wind up there?
Well, you know, being an ex-Navy pilot, I had a ticket to go out to 720 training out with Northwest Airlines. And you fly such great airplanes in the Navy that I always had in Alaska, I used to play in the saloons in Alaska, in Cordova, in Valdez, Juneau, the Red Dog Saloon. And I got so that I really loved saloons. You know, sawdust on the floor and a honky-tonk piano player. And I loved people having good times. And I just didn't want to be an airline pilot. So, I mean, I woke up, you know, and there it was, daylight, and I'd been up since 4 o'clock. But I sent the ticket back to the airline, and I said, if I ever want to become an airline pilot, you're the first ones I'll ever talk to. So
they're still waiting for that call.
That's right. So I went down and got an old, beat-up tobacco warehouse that was built in 1886, and with the help of 2 other black guys and myself, who I am entirely indebted to, and who stayed with me for 30 years, we built Rosie O'Grady's. And I did most of the work with them. We didn't have enough money. J.W. and Willie, I paid it 25 cents an hour. Now this is back in '67. And then I said, now, if you hang in there, I'll give you another 25 cents an hour when we open up. And they said, well, you got a deal. Now, you gonna buy the beer? I said, I'll buy the beer. So we opened up. We didn't have enough money to put in the register, and all the can girls and cocktail waitresses had to empty their pockets and purses to give us enough change to work out. And luckily, I had a Dixieland band when I was in the Navy called the South Hangar 6. And this South Hangar 6 it's amazing during Vietnam how many good musicians would rather fly airplanes than slog through a rice paddy in Vietnam. It was a pretty hot Dixieland band. And the South Hangar 6 played all over. We played at admirals' parties, and we played down at disreputable saloons down on Palafox, and so I got the whole South Anger 6 in there, and we had a standing line every night going left and over the railroad tracks for about a block, and it's amazing how fast you can pay something off if you don't have anything in it.
1972, what drew you to Orlando?
Well, Seville Quarter was going real well, and by the way, Seville Quarter just celebrated its 53rd anniversary. Now, you being in the entertainment business, you know that that's a lot of legs. That's a lot of legs in this business. Seville Quarter is 9 different operations, and I love the tourism business. I love people that are having a good time and don't have to get up in the morning, and I've been looking forward to it all week, and all they want to do is have fun. I'm not much for local operations. So the tourism in Pensacola was not what you call red hot. It was good for about 2 months, 2.5 months in the summertime. So I looked at what was the best tourist area in Florida, and I came down to Orlando, and that's what I found.
Gotcha. Now, you never quit flying. You started Rosie O'Grady's Flying Circus.
That's right.
With your pal, Colonel Joe Kittinger.
That's right.
Flying hot air balloons, skywriting, and ultimately annoying the hell out of Dick Nunes by using the airspace over Magic Kingdom as your personal billboard.
Yeah. He never. I think he finally forgave me about it, but it came so close that they came down with a group and wanted to buy Seville Quarter or Church Street Station before I sold it to Baltimore Gas and Electric, just to quiet down the Flying Circus, I think. But we had 5 airplanes, and we were doing skywriting, and I told Joe, I taught everybody how to skywrite. At one time, I was the only skywriter in the United States. So the FAA has to give you a waiver. And I had this waiver to do aerobatics over a control zone, over a city. So I taught Joe how to skywrite. And he was just a wonderful friend and a great pilot, and the first man in space. And I said, now Joe, now you know skywriting, you do the reverse image of what you see on the ground. So you do an R and you do it backwards. So I said, now get on out there in the tarmac in front of our hangar and walk through this. And then you use a piece of plexiglass and you write it on, and then you turn it over. And Joe, I'm an ex-colonel in the Air Force. And I said, then you go over you go over an overcast and get up to 15,000 feet and practice. Practice what you're going to do, because it's in front of hundreds of thousands of people.
You only get one chance to get it
You
right.
only get one chance. So the next day, I'm driving down I-4, and I look up, and there's a skywriter up there. And I had 3 skywriters working that were also mechanics and also towed the big aerial billboards for us. And I see a sloppy kind of an R, and then I see O, and then I see an I, and then I see an S, whoops, and I go, oh my God. And so, you know what he did? He crossed it out. He went and crossed it out. And then he did the I-E-S. And it was an embarrassment, really. I mean, I just said, oh Lord, I got a recalcitrant retired colonel on my hand. So I called up down there, and he was on the phone. I said, Joe, this is snow. He says, he said, I can teach you how to skywrite, but I can't teach you how to spell. So you're going to have to work on the spelling before we get into any more skywriting. But we did this in Lily Marlene's bar, in the restaurant. And we did this all the night before on cocktail napkins. And I showed them how to make each letter. There's about 3 different ways you can make each letter, depending upon the transitions.
Right.
And he left there with about an inch thick of cocktail napkins. But it was a symbol of who we were. It worked out really well. Joe and I flew balloons all over the world. We flew in all across Russia, from Lithuania to Moscow. We put up the Rosie O'Grady balloon in Gorky Park.
Oh my!
In Gorky Park, with the KGB. We were in the first the first trans-Russian balloon race representing the U.S.
Nice.
And this was it took us a month, and we finally got to Russia, and everybody was just ready to get out. And I said, I had a banjo player, and I had Mickey Finn, a great piano player. I had him with us with a little synthesizer, and I said, let's go to Gorky Park and put up the Rosie O'Grady balloon with all the American flags on it. Now this was before perestroika. This was back when it was the Soviet Union, and we put I had 20 of our Flying Circus crew there, and we put that big balloon up in Gorky Park with all the flags, American flags waving, and the KGB guy was just going nuts. And we played "God Bless America" with a Dixieland band, and we got it down before they brought the politicos in. So we did it, and we've got that on film, and it was on ABC television.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
So then we've flown across Australia, and we flew all over Europe, and we won a lot of races. The Gordon Bennett, of course, Joe Kittinger retired the trophy, and it's been a lot of fun. You talked about what it takes to get in this business. You've got to love having a good time. I mean, if you go into this thing for money, it ain't gonna work, because in the beginning, especially, you can make 10 times as much doing anything else than being in the restaurant business and in the entertainment business. But if you like to see people having a good time, and you like to be a part of it, and you like to see the good side of people, and not all what you see on the television, it's a great, great industry to get into. It really is. It's you never work another day of your life, which, of course, you know.
That's what the show's about.
Yeah.
Rosie O'Grady's is a big hit in Orlando, and you start expanding like nobody's business. Could you run down for us what that was like, the expansion, what that entailed?
Well, you're right. Let me tell you. Let me tell you a little quick story. I bought the T6, this great big Skyrider. That's a World War II fighter trainer, and I bought it up in Lawrence County, Massachusetts. And the old guy that was a Skyrider there taught me how to skywrite, and we drank beer and ate clams. And anyhow, I flew it back down, and because I had a buddy that I went through flight training with that was he was a Marine pilot, and he was out and lived in Winter Park. And I looked at every place. He just had to have a Rosie O'Grady's in Central Florida, and I couldn't find anything. So I was going back to the airport executive at the time, Herndon Airport, and I had this old, this great black cab driver, and he was saying, and I said, "Mister, haven't you got any old buildings around here at all? Everything I've seen has been car dealerships and this and big buildings and old buildings, nothing old." He said, "Well, we got this railroad station downtown." I said, really? I said, can you bring me there? He said, well, we're right at Ronnie's restaurant right here, and we're right at Executive. I said, just turn around and bring me down there. And so he brought me down there, and I looked at Church Street, and of course it was a ghetto, but all the old buildings, and I looked at that Church Street station, and I said, just keep the meter running. And he kept the meter running for an hour and a half. And I looked into every one of the glass fronts, and I looked into the Church Street station, and the Church Street station was still working as a train station. And I called up. I just knew that. I called up my buddy Steve Fuller, who built Underground Atlanta and was a very good friend of mine, and I said, I think I've just found it. And I looked into the Rosie O'Grady's building, which was the old Orlando Hotel, and I saw that the balconies and all that. So that's how I did it. Now, Rosie O'Grady's, I put 30 pieces of property together, which was no small trick.
Yeah.
I put everything from Pine Street to Church Street to Jackson to South Street to the East-West Expressway. Most of that spaghetti that you see down there
That they're building now?
that they're building now and have almost got done, that's about half on our property. I put about 10 of those little old shacks together and buildings, and I bought all that stuff to use as our support and our back of the house.
You have to kill somebody.
And I had probably $450,000 in it. And when it got condemned, after I'd already sold Church Street to Baltimore Gas and Electric, it sold to FDOT for $17.5 million. So that's when you go over the spaghetti overpasses, just that you're going over where our fire truck used to be and where the horse carriages used to be for the carriage rides, and then Rosie O'Grady's held up all that 30 pieces of property, all by itself. Now, granted, I bought most of it for $3 to $4 to $5 a foot. And then I got condemnation rights for the buildings. And then I restored the buildings. So I didn't have, it's pretty easy to assemble a ghetto because the only people that are down there that own it are people that are trying to get out. And we had Edie's Bar, and we had the Manpower, and we had Salvation Army. I mean, you get the point. And so I put all that together, and Rosie's, God love her, she just kept everything going. She just kept all those mortgages up to date and kept pouring it. She, so then we did Appelanni's, and then Lily Marlene's, and then Phineas Fogg's, and then did you remember that big balloon we put up in the back?
Yeah.
That was something. And we put that balloon up in the back, and we raised about $250,000 for charity, because we charged. The ladies didn't like to get on a scale, and we charged by the pound, but we didn't. And when I was in England, I found this scale that was in stones. So this lady could get up there, and she would pay for 7 stones instead of 155 pounds or whatever it would be. Anyhow, so we did that, and then we went across the street and did the Cheyenne Saloon, and did the Bumby Arcade, and the Orchid Garden Ballroom, the Buffalo Trading Company, and then I got to know Jim Rouse. And remember Jim Rouse?
I remember him as the guy who said Disneyland was the greatest piece of urban planning in the world.
Yeah, and he was a partner of Walt Disney's at one time. And he started the Rouse Company, and he started also the Enterprise Development Company. And let me tell you how I found him. This is an amazing story. At least I think it is. So we went to the grand opening of Epcot. and it was pouring rain. And there was a Mexican restaurant, and it was a big line up there, and we kind of snuck in a little bit. And Linda, my wife, was with me, and she said, "Well, it's going to be about a 45-minute wait," and everybody was soaking wet. And he said, "But I got two chairs over here if you mind to join it, if you don't mind joining somebody." And I said, "Yeah, okay." So I sat down there, and he had a raincoat on, and put our umbrellas down and all that kind of stuff. And I said, "Well, where are you folks from?" And he said, "I'm from Columbia." I said, "Oh, I'm from Orlando. I'm Bob Snow." And he goes up, he grabs my hand, he says, "I'm Jim Rouse." In all that rain, in all that 10,000 people, I got seated in the only two chairs right next to Jim Rouse. And I brought him down and showed him all of Church Street, and he just became enamored with what we were doing, and we built the Exchange building together as a joint venture. The only time I ever had an argument with him, it was really getting down to it as to whether we were going to do 2 floors on the Exchange. This is our specialty retailing. I wanted to do this game room up on the top floor. And Jim said, "No, Snow, the 3rd floor doesn't work." He said, I can't see it. I said, "All right, I'll do it myself. And I'll pay for it." And I built it, and we went up 3 floors, and I did Commander Ragtimes, and I did it with a joint venture with Atari, and it was the most successful. It was the most successful game room that Atari ever built, and I built it and turnkeyed it to them. But we had 47 Indian motorcycles up there. We had race cars up on top of that. We had trains going around and all the airplanes, and it was a lot of fun.
I never forget the first time I walked into Cheyenne Saloon. The first thing I had to do was I had to get up way up there. I had to get up to that top floor.
Yeah.
I said I couldn't believe the scale of everything, or how beautiful it was. I had worked on a couple of themed restaurants in California, one for Universal that we built called Womp Hopper's Wagon Works. It was a $3 million restaurant and just exquisitely done with old barnwood and wagons hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
It was built like an old wagon factory. But when I walked into the Cheyenne Saloon, my eyes bugged out. It was just a masterpiece, just beautiful piece.
Well, let me tell you, what I just said about that was probably the best 2 years of my life, because by this time I had attracted all the best people in the industry. I had the best managers. I had the best looking gals and the greatest, sharpest guys, and I had a whole family from Poland that was running my mill shop. We did everything with the Great American Exposition, and we did it with the Great American Restoration, which was my construction company. We did everything except air conditioning, electrical, and plumbing, which we didn't want to screw with. But we did all the metal work, we did all the brick work, and then we had this mill shop. And every time somebody would escape out of East Germany from Poland, he'd come up to me, and he didn't speak real good English. Leon Barkowiak. Leon would say, "Mr. Snow, I've got my cousin just got over, and yeah, you got him, Leon. Just keep putting them to work." Well, we had 10 Leon Barkowiaks from that family running that mill shop, and he was the most talented. Every piece of wood you saw in the Cheyenne Saloon went through his hands. And then Lee Farr, who was a top art director from Disney, came with me about 30 years ago, and we'd sit there at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night in Lily's, drawing on the back of cocktail napkins and brown paper bags, and he'd go up, and he had his art department and 2 of his graphic people and designers up on top of the 3rd floor of the railroad station, up where the dormer windows are.
Right.
And I'd go back And we'd close up around 2 o'clock, and at about 2:30, the lights were still on up on the top of the railroad station in Lee Farr's design. We called it the Skunk Works, you know. And he would then take those cocktail napkins and brown paper bags. He would reduce those to, he'd work all night and reduce those to shop drawings and have it with Leon Barkowiak the next morning at 7 o'clock.
Oh, nice.
And I was living in a private railroad car, which was my home for 10 years. And I just loved it. And I could just open up the louvers, and there was my mill shop, just going and blowing, as they say. So
Nice.
what I'm saying is, there were so many talented people that would come in and they'd see the work we were doing, and they wanted to be a part of it. And oh, by the way, you know, they didn't really care. They had to have enough money to live, but it wasn't like you were getting a commercial job someplace. You were part of a dream, and that's what made it all happen. And we had the best, you know. We used to sit in front of Lily Marlene's, and I'd have managers around me, and we'd see the nickel beer. Remember nickel beer? And all the great looking people in Orlando came down there, and they'd be walking through, and we used to bet each other as to where they worked, how much education they had, and what their parents did for a living. And we ended up, and you know, you can tell that. You can tell the character of a person pretty, if you really study it, you can do that pretty quickly. Not quickly, but you can develop it. And we develop it, and we got these, we go to this good looking gal and say, you know, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Orlando. Where do you work? Oh, I'm a bank teller. How would you like to dance on a bar in Rosie's? She said, really? You know, and all she had to do was be asked. And then the next thing you know, about 2 weeks later, you know, Mr. Snow, I've got a roommate that you could probably use too, and she'd like to be a cocktail waitress or maybe dance on the bar. Well, she was as good looking as the first one, so that's how we built up this whole. We ended up with about 800 employees down there. We ended up with 75 singers, dancers, musicians, country western, bluegrass, Dixieland, of course.
The thing that struck me, that I vividly remember about Church Street, was the fact that the people who worked there were having as much fun as any of the paying guests.
Oh yeah. That is so true. And to this day, I'll be sitting in a restaurant and a fellow will come up to me and he said, Mr. Snow, I'm Dr. Joe Smith, and I used to work for you as a singing waiter or as a, whatever. And he said, those were the best years of my life.
So what are you working on now? You got Snow and Company Creative Enterprises.
Yeah.
Have anything coming up?
I'm working on a project in Tampa that's down on the water. I'm also very interested in what's going on downtown in Orlando, because with the arena, the soccer stadium, and all of that, I'm working with Guy Butler, who's a great architect, who's a guy that worked with us on the Exchange, and he did all the construction drawings for the Exchange. We're talking about trying to do a linear park, which is about 200 feet wide, meandering park that goes all the way from the Amway Arena to Citrus Bowl, and collects people from the soccer stadium, and then you can have hotels and apartments and all that right on the park. It could be part old and part new and part historical and part, just like the French Quarter is, which is one of my favorite cities.
Well, thank you, Bob, for coming out. This has just been a tremendous treat. Everyone, I'm Ron Schneider. Follow your bliss, and you're in for one hell of a ride.